Greetings, students, and congratulations on getting to this point in the class. If you're watching this video, it means that you are nearing the end of your public speaking semester, because today we're talking about Chapter 11, Delivering Your Speech, and we always save this concept for the end of the semester, or for near the end, and I think that this is either the last reading or nearly the last reading that you have in your course syllabus. Just like in any other class, the concepts we cover are designed to build as the semester moves along. The assignments build on each other as well. You may have noticed that every speech is a little bit longer than the speech before it in terms of the time limit you're given. And also, the readings in the text, although we've not covered the book in numerical order, chapter by chapter, every assignment is designed to build on the concepts and things that you learned from the last speech. You have to use those things in addition to the new things you're learning. So here we are at the end of the semester, and we're talking about delivery. The reason that we save delivery for the end is because these things that we're going to be talking about today are kind of the finer points of delivering a speech, and we're not prepared to think about the finer points at the earlier parts of the semester. You know, when we just start studying public speaking, all we're trying to do is stand up on stage without passing out and without, dying of anxiety. And we've all, we've gotten through that stage now, and here we are at the end of the semester, older and wiser with more experience under our belt. And so now that we've learned a little bit about overcoming stage fright, we're ready to go on and think a little bit more specifically and intentionally about delivery. The same is true for the use of language. The last video you guys watched, or the one before that, was about using language effectively, things like metaphors and similes, and vivid language and imagery and all that. And we don't emphasize doing that at the beginning of the semester because, again, we're aware that at the beginning of the semester, we're just trying to get our feet under us, trying to organize a basic message and get the point across at all. That's a pretty big accomplishment. But now that we're at the end of the semester, we expect not just basic organization and not just getting the point across, but getting the point across well, using effective language. And language is one thing, but again, this isn't just an English class where you're using language. This is a public speaking class, and delivery is a part of it as well. So that's why today we're talking about delivery. Now, as you look at Chapter 11, you'll find at the beginning that it talks about some stuff that we actually did talk about at the beginning of the semester, because we had to touch on delivery a little bit. And it talks about methods of delivery at the beginning of this chapter. And those are things that we've already covered at the first week. We talked about like extemporaneous delivery versus memorized speeches versus transcript speeches. And you know that all the speeches in this class have to be extemporaneously delivered, which means carefully prepared and delivered from a brief set of notes. So we're not talking about methods of delivery or styles of delivery. Today we're talking about characteristics of effective delivery. And this can generally be broken down into two categories, body and voice. And you'll see these really easily in the bold-faced text in the chapter. But the subjects, when we think about using our body effectively in our delivery, we're talking about things like hand gestures, we're talking about eye contact, stage movement, posture, facial expressions, and personal appearance. Each one of these could take, we could really delve into the details of each one of those over the course of well, we could take as long as we wanted to discuss each of these because there's lots of nuances to each of them. For example, eye contact. There have been lots of scientific studies that have investigated the impact that eye contact makes on human communication. And people have done studies about how when you make eye contact with people, it's a sign of trust, and you can build trust easier. I'm not sure why that is, what the scientific reason behind it is. For as far as I'm concerned, the only thing I need to know is that the eyes are the window to the soul, so to speak. And it just makes sense that eye contact is going to increase trust and make people feel like they have more of a personal connection to you. And I leave it to the scientists to figure out why. But eye contact is important. Facial expressions are important. I'll never forget my public speaking instructor in my intro class. He said, if you're happy and you know it, tell your face. You should be smiling at different points at least throughout the delivery, just to let people know you're having fun, that you're enjoying yourself, even if you technically are not. You have to fake it till you make it. Personal appearance, it's important to always dress for the occasion. Posture, you're standing up straight. One thing we haven't talked about, and I haven't seen much of in your videos, is movement, stage movement. And that's okay. The reason for that, no doubt, is that your tripod, if you are recording this by yourself, is fairly static. It can't follow you as you walk around, and that's the same with me. But when you are giving a speech on a stage or in some other situation, you can really use movement to communicate a lot. For example, if you want to transition from main point 1 to main point 2, you may be standing on one side of the stage, and when you want to signal to your audience that you are transitioning to a new topic, it's very natural to walk across the stage. And that is an element of delivery that has to do with the body. Let's see. We've talked about personal appearance, facial expression, posture, movement, eye contact. The final one on body has to do with gestures. And this is something that I do see in many of your videos, and I encourage you to continue to use gestures as much as you can. You'll find, like in my videos, I pretty much only use them when I'm counting, and that's an effective way to keep people on track. When you're signposting, you're saying things like first, second, third. It's nice to just use some gestures to reinforce what you're saying, because it helps the audience feel, or it keeps them a little bit more engaged. A lot of you who do talk with your hands, you're very good at making sure that your gestures correspond with what you're saying. It's not just like your arms like moving randomly. So the book says, if you're going to use gestures, use them intentionally and use them to emphasize what you're saying. So we've been talking about nonverbal elements of delivery, things that have to do with the body instead of the voice. But there are elements of delivery that have to do with the voice. And the book divides it up into two different categories. The voice, you're speaking to be understood, and speaking with variety. And the speaking to be understood tends to come pretty easily to us. Those are things like volume. You have to use enough volume in your delivery, otherwise people can't understand you because they can't hear you. Good articulation of words. Be sure to bite out each one of your words and say each one clearly. Use good dialect, good pronunciation. But the thing that probably I should emphasize most of all as you go into this last speech is this last category under voice, speaking with variety. When you're in a conversation with your friend, sometimes you'll talk faster, sometimes you'll talk slower. Sometimes you'll talk louder, sometimes you'll quiet down a little bit. Sometimes your voice will inflect up at the end, and sometimes it'll just be smooth. But the important thing is that there is variety when people talk in conversations. And so we want to simulate that variety in our speeches. The temptation is to let our voice flatten out, and because we're trying to be like formal, we tend to flatten out and we start to be monotone, and that is the worst. So be careful when you're giving your speech to use the same kind of variation or variety that you would use in a conversation. Finally, don't worry too much about saying or People tend to be really hard on themselves about that, but I don't think that people even notice it unless it's really overused. And for most of us, it's very natural just to say or we do it in conversation, because when there's someone else talking and we need to stop for a second, but we're not done, we don't want the other person to start talking, it's very natural and appropriate to say or use verbal filler, because that signals to the other person, hey, I'm not done, don't cut me off, I'm just taking a breath or I'm gathering my thoughts. So it's a natural, appropriate to use verbal filler in conversation. It's not appropriate in a public speech because you're the only one talking and no one is going to cut you off. So the function, the use of verbal filler it is no longer is no longer there, but we still use it. We still use it because we're trying to stimulate conversation. That's exactly what we should be doing. But the one thing about conversation that isn't there is the other person. So verbal filler is no longer necessary. All that said, you will use it as long as it's not overused. People won't even notice it. I don't notice it, so don't worry about it too much. All right, as you go into this final speech, I encourage you to focus on some elements of delivery. Look at that chapter again. Look at the bold-faced words. See which ones that you have not used yet in your previous speeches. If it's gestures, then intentionally put in a gesture. Just like I asked in the language chapter, if you've not used metaphors, deliberately put one in. Challenge yourself to use these techniques, because that is the purpose of this class, to make sure not only that you are giving speeches, but you are giving speeches well. You're not only learning the fundamentals, but you're utilizing them. And I have no doubt that you will succeed if you try. So give it your best shot, and I look forward to seeing those speeches very soon. Thank you.